It happened fairly recently where the police inspectors didn't come around for 2 days after the robbery. And then they sent over a couple of goons in plain clothes. Real goons. And, they sort of shuffled around and looked at things and went off. They don't give a damn. Because they've got too much to do. And they're underpaid. So my proposal is in general that the duties of police be restricted to 4 areas. 1, protecting us from robbery. 2, protecting us from violence. 3, directing traffic. And 4, giving aid to persons in distress. The personnel of vice squads and narcotic squads could simply be transferred to these other duties. Because in all conscience, there's enough to do in those 4 areas. Then you say, well, what are you going to do about these other things? Well, let's face it, let's be realistic. There are going to be people, there always have been people, who do silly things. It's stupid to become dependent on drugs. It's pretty stupid to gamble. But you can't stop people being stupid by law. Nor can you make people moral by law. It's the essence of Christian ideas that morality is of no significance unless whatever is done or whatever is not done is done freely. In other words, it has to be your own voluntary act. A person who is compelled to be moral is not, in Christian view, moral at all, but merely scared. And therefore, we would immensely relieve some of our social problems if we took all sumptuary laws off the books. Legitimized prostitution, gambling, and treat drug taking as a health problem. I think things like marijuana, which are relatively harmless, should be available on the same basis as alcohol. Licensed, not sold to minors, what have you. As to harder drugs, I think this is a problem for physicians and health clinics, not police. Definitely not police. So, in that case, what would happen? There would be at least a temporary rise, perhaps, in the use of these things. But freedom necessarily involves risk. You cannot have a free country which is at the same time a nursery. Now here's the FDA about to prohibit the sale of vitamins above a certain strength except on prescription. What are they going to interfere with next? As an adult male who has a fair knowledge of these things, I feel insulted by the making of these recommendations into law. I feel grateful to the FDA if it confines itself to giving advice. But when laws are passed so that I can't buy what vitamins I want to buy without a doctor's prescription, I feel offended. I feel that my intellect and judgment are insulted. So I'm perfectly willing to read the books and find out what's dangerous and what isn't, or what somebody's opinion is about what's dangerous and what isn't. Because medicine is not an exact science by a long shot. But when more and more laws are passed, the situation becomes intolerable. See, we have a very naive faith in law. Everybody says there ought to be a law against it. So they make a law against it. And that makes everything more complicated. Because you can hardly move today without a lawyer to tell you what you may and may not do. Especially in business. And especially in small business. So we are surrounded with law. And surrounded with officers and officials who are acting supposedly for our own good, but actually acting for their own good, because it's their job. Now, if we took sumptuary laws off the books, we would empty the jails by at least a third of their population. The jails are jam full of people who ought not to be in jail at all, because they're in there for sin as distinct from crime. And they don't feel guilty, and therefore they resent being imprisoned. And the state of imprisonment merely confirms them in their hatred of society. In California, we're supposed to have the very best jails in the country. Places like Vacaville and San Quentin are supposed to be real far out. They are unbelievably dreadful, because they're a Kafkaesque situation with people in there on 1 to 10-year sentences. And we'll let you out if you show signs of improvement. And nobody knows what they're supposed to do. What is showing a sign of improvement? And will the probation officers consider that I'm merely showing signs of improvement as a pretense in order to get out, so that I can recommence the life of crime? And these then psychiatrists and probation officers have very subjective judgments about whether the person is faking or not. So these inmates are in the frightful position of total uncertainty as to how long they will be in there. Don't forget, too, that in the United States, prison means a lot more than being out of harm's way so that you won't harm society. It means sexual deprivation. It means the lousiest diet imaginable. And it is, all penologists pretty much agree that our prisons are schools for crime and sodomy. So when you put the rather sensitive people who tend to become addicts in these institutions, you create an abomination. And there's no answer, and it merely increases the enemies of society. March before last, the Sixth Army sent its top brass to the Esalen Institute. Now, the Esalen Institute you may have heard of. It's what's called a human potential center, or a growth center in California, where we study everything from religion to psychotherapy to group encounter to all kinds of things, sensory awareness training. And all the top brass came down there for 10 days to study what might be alternatives to drug turn-ons. The alternative turn-on. And while the public meetings were, as usual, talks involving an immense amount of memorandumese, there was a very sensible general there, General Tolleson. And in these conferences, all the valuable work is done over the coffee table and not in the public meetings. So at great length, talking with him and with the chief psychiatrist, Colonel Livingston at Letterman's, they absolutely agreed that this could not be solved by police methods. But the public is in such a state of panic and has such a naive faith in the law and law enforcement that a congressman who tries to overturn the situation is terrified of losing his votes. The drug abuse problem is a problem not of those who abuse drugs, but of society at large. And society at large has to be educated to see that those who are addicts are in fact sick, they are not criminals, and we must look very carefully at the British way of handling the problem, on which there have been some articles recently in the New Yorker that are wonderfully well informed, showing that their problem is nothing compared to ours.